Hey everyone, it's me, Emma, again with Aidan. This is our second interview. We're going to talk about big data parsing for alerting. So yeah, we covered in the first video, the importance of um, you, Jesus, please help me, UBA.
User behavior analytics.
User behavior analytics, exactly. So yeah, let's talk why this is important, how it relates to big data parsing, how it helps the alerting, how it helps to avoid alert fatigue. It's still a big subject, not as big as it was couple of years ago, but still, when we are talking with our customers, the challenges they are facing, one side of challenges, SIMs are not capturing all the alerts. On the other hand, too many alerts. So how to identify what's important, and so on. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I think from that point of view, yeah, you're right. It does seem to be a bit of a pendulum. You are either not picking up enough or you're flooding your SOC and they can't handle the volume.
Yeah.
So I think with something like UBA, I think, and if you're incorporating stuff like machine learning as well for your monitoring baselines and deviations, I think it's important to just invest heavily in the development of that and recognize that you might not see the return from day one, because it is just a case of once you get the ball rolling, there is that snowball effect. Once you give the algorithm more and more data to work with, yes, it might, fire a little bit too much or not fire enough in the beginning. I think it's very important for these organizations to run like very long proof of concepts for UBA. I think for some organizations where you have like a sort of very small number of employees covering a wide range of tasks, UBA is probably not the most applicable solution. UBA is probably more targeted, in my opinion, at very large organizations with quite a number of employees and pretty defined separation of duties, so that you at least have some sort of baseline going into it when you're programming it. But it is quite a topic of contention out with UBA as well, with the amount of data that you're taking in and how it's resulting in alerts for especially managed SOCs as well as internal SOCs alike. The flooding of alerts, and especially when you mix that in with a poor asset inventory and issues where you're not correctly prioritizing alerts based on the content. So if it's, a very like a category 1 or a severity 1 server, very critical business application, needs to be treated slightly differently to some other alerts. But if you don't have the asset inventory, that's not working. But again, ultimately, if you're having thousands of alerts flooding into your SOC at any one time, then it's just way too much. So using as much intelligence as possible through machine learning and things like that. But I think baking some actual threat intelligence in too as well is very important. At the organization I'm at, we have a massive focus on intelligence, and intelligence out with, across cybersecurity is a massive area in terms of just catching up to the threat actors. We, as especially blue team, we need to make sure that we get every single sort of skirmish right. We need to win every battle, but the attackers only need to win one. They only need to get in one time, and then they're happy. They've achieved it, and they're happy to lay dormant and then wait until they can actually enact exactly what they want. So creating as much intelligence around our alerting as possible and using that baked into our security rules, it's a massive thing, and it can reduce the number of sort of false positives and like floods of alerts that the SOC are getting as well. So big data has in the right hands, I think it's a great power that you can wield when you have that sort of insight into your organization right on the ground. Anything that's changed, you can sniff it out in a massive data set, and you really can find the needle in the haystack with big data, but only if it's parsed correctly and if it's used correctly. I think in untrained hands, it is just a wave that can wash you away, and so much value can be lost just by the amount of useless information that big data provides sometimes, because a lot of the time for your alerting criteria, it's just not fully useful. Some stuff is just black and white. If you're looking at a privilege escalation event on Linux, you literally only need the command run on the OS. You don't need any other log sources. You don't need network. You don't need anything else.
You make me think. I'm listening to you, and you make me think. So our technical team, again, in many customer projects, where I see our technical team starts is often assessing the data quality. From data, we have actionable information. Actionable information leads to decision making at strategic level, and this decision making really depends on the quality of data. You might think you have better cybersecurity posture than you really do, because again, there is lack of visibility, and certain areas remain gray, and so on. So yeah, again, it's very interesting and very relevant topic. Again, it's nothing new. It's basics, but so often we see the basics are being overlooked, or there is not enough knowledge how to fine-tune this part. So what would be your advice? What exactly, maybe a couple of tips or one tip that has really worked in terms of, from your experience, in terms of fine-tuning, improving the data quality, maybe technology. You talked about ML technology that has helped to achieve this, or any other, process. Again, your opinion on this. We are thinking from, there will be many viewers, listeners who will look at this video and will think, oh, okay, Aidan has given us this tip, let's go and try.
Yeah. I think it's all really about trimming the fat from your log sources. I think the smaller and the closer to alerting criteria that your log sources can be is the ideal. The least amount of parsing. It's just a case of, right, we've identified something, let's use a little bit of intelligence, or let's double check some stuff and then alert. You don't want too much to be done, because again, a lot of value can be lost in heaps and heaps of logs. Threat hunting is still one of the leading ways that we find new detective controls and use cases. A threat hunt is just literally just discovering something that we've missed when we've been mapping a technology out for security monitoring. And that becomes incredibly difficult when you're looking at like terabytes and terabytes of logs, and it's just filler and filler. If you are looking through logs of MMDs, like Microsoft managed devices, if you have laptops like that or something like that, and you're just looking at your proxy logs, you might find like 90% of those logs might just be callouts to Microsoft.com looking for updates. Do you really need to see those? I think a lot of times people don't really feel empowered to go in and cut stuff out, because with security, if you cut out the wrong thing, you've missed an alert. And if you miss an alert, you potentially allow an intrusion, and that's the big no-no. And that's when the executives and the senior management, that's when they get bothered by that. They don't really get bothered by you having extra data. in your SIM solution. So I think it's important that we make engineers feel empowered to just make decisions based on their knowledge of security. You know, we hire engineers for their knowledge of security, but sometimes we're like, okay, well, we need to keep this data in because we're not sure if we'll need it. I think it's you need to just give the power to the engineers and say, look, if you think there's zero value in this particular log, for example, and it's based on your expertise and your knowledge of security, then just get rid of it and just trim the fat there and make it easier to see what the actual value in the logs are. I think a lot of SIM solutions can just end up being sort of glorified IT operations, like monitoring servers and making sure that everything's up and just taking any log that they can get their hands on, when ultimately a SIM tool should literally only be for security. If you have a multi-tenanted tool for something like that, then that's completely understandable. But if you're talking about a log source, a security log source, a security sensor, should only have security events in it, or any event that could be used to add context to a security event. And I think we need to empower engineers to be able to use their knowledge and trim the fat from these log sources without the fear of, you know, reciprocity from their senior management and their executives, because it's big news if you miss an alert.
Yeah.
But if you're, you know, cutting stuff out. But I think we run a little bit too high with the amount of data that we use. So big data is that tool that you can use to really get a lot of value from your logs and really get a proper holistic view of your organization. But you need to empower your engineers on the ground to make decisions about the quality of it.
True. And not only quality, but also integrity, right? So there have been some publications about few hacks that really messed the log integrity. You know, logs are key for auditing purposes, as you say, extract the value and convert data into actionable information. But you know, what are the aspects of ensuring the logs you have are like, you know, are real ones? The integrity of same is not messed. I'm not talking about all logs, but maybe a part, you know, is there, what are your thoughts on this? Because, you know, hackers are finding different ways to mess with organizations and compromise their data. So what is your thinking on that?
Yeah, I think it's important, especially when you set up from a, it's more of like a security architect kind of area. But I think it's really important to use multiple technologies to kind of create a minefield for these threat actors, because ultimately there's always going to be a way to get around one specific detection. As long as technology exists, there will always be a way to get around that. If there's a check, you can get around it eventually. If there's any sort of validation, there'll be a way to get around it. And I think the only real key is kind of defense in depth with your use of different technologies and different detections. So the integrity of your logs may be sort of, there may be issues with it if people, you know, go and disable logging, or they start printing loads of bogus logs to sort of throw you off. But if you set up a minefield around a threat actor's sort of initial attack vector, then eventually they are going to trip something up. You know, the running of the exploit, the running of the exploit might get by your systems, but the attempted like privilege escalation at the end of it, or the attempted C2 callback, or the download, or the sort of wrapping up of the information to be exported, at one point you'll get alerted if you create that minefield around your system. So that's probably almost like a security architecting concept. But from the idea of big data is taking all the data in from these minefields. You know, some of them may just sit dormant and not actually provide you any value for a while, but you will feel it one day when it's the last detection that's triggered and just manages to catch something by the skin of its teeth, I think is very important, because a threat actor can get through detections one-on-one, but when you surround them, it becomes very hard to move around and actually perform some nefarious and malicious actions. So it's probably a very important thing for me, I would say.
Nice. Aidan, if I may ask, for your input again. Big thing in our organization is a very clear and loud message that cybersecurity is not just technical matters. As you rightly pointed out in the first video, let's include the human factor as assets as well. So it's collaborations between departments play a big role, and what we are seeing again, it sounds simple, but the reality is in many organizations there are many cultural differences, and not I mean cultural policies, I would say, or just a different cybersecurity culture. That's what I mean more. So it's about collaboration. What is, again, from your point of view, effective collaboration, being SIM engineer, security engineer, how to effectively communicate with the SOC level 1 analyst, the level 2, how to pass the information, and not just pass information, but collaborations. Again, what we are hearing from other interviews, there is a lot of duplication of work going on. It's more every area or department in different organizations might be more isolated, and there is, as I say, the communication and collaboration part that is not fully explored. So what would be your view? Have you had this experience? What was the way out? What could you recommend?
Collaboration, yeah, it's a bit of a stickler in security. I think security to security collaboration is something that we're not too bad at, I think. As a SIM or a security engineering team, they're usually pretty central to all aspects of security operations. So inputs to SOC and IR, as well as like getting fed into from security architects and project requirements and things like that. So I think it kind of becomes the job of the security engineers to be the glue. And
I like it.
Sort of pull all the teams together and align the focus and the sort of purpose and vision of the areas. I think we do quite a good job, especially from like the security engineering point of view, working with the SOC and IR functions, but sometimes the priorities misalign. Sometimes the priorities of our team maybe to just get the sort of best quality of data through to IR functions, but sometimes the priority of other teams may be, okay, like we need to like manage alerts properly, or we need to be getting like higher quality of data through, or we need to be working to better our processes. And I feel like this is, it's a back and forth that sometimes happens across cybersecurity, is that there can be a slight misalignment of purposes. So I think you just need to bake a little quid pro quo into it. Like obviously security engineering teams are going to have to undertake a lot of tuning work to make sure that their controls are working perfectly for their SOC and IR functions. And that's going to be something that they don't directly see the result of. So sometimes you just need to say to them, well, if you do this, then downstream, we're going to make it a little bit easy for you by, doing some more stuff in-house, baking more into our incident response processes and giving you more back. So I think it's a bit of a quid pro quo when you're in the cybersecurity area, but I still think there is quite a lot of difficulty out with cybersecurity coming in, especially when security is not one of the sort of leaders in the delivery aspect of projects and applications. I think security, we kind of say, okay, we'll wait till the end so that you have everything deployed and we know exactly what we need to secure. But what happens then is that if we say, for example, we're not happy with that, then we're the last gate before a project goes live.
Deadlines.
A project manager approaching a deadline does not want to hear something that they should have really known from the start. And I think things like DevSecOps and security shifting left are massive concepts in the development of these projects, where I think you can ease a lot of headaches for project managers coming to security and saying, okay, guys, we've got this stuff to secure. Is this okay? And then you go back and say, actually, no. And it's going to be a while to secure it. And they're just sitting there like, well, how did I not know about this 6 months ago when the project started? And I think if you can bring things like security shifting left and embed DevSecOps engineers in that process, people who are interested in development for purpose, so actually building a practical application, but also knowing at some point there's going to have to be an answer to security made. So we need to make sure that we're baking security in from the start. It's just going to stop the headaches, and then it'll just, come to a point where we are just double checking the work of DevSecOps or other sort of security engineers embedded within projects, and then it doesn't sort of become this big, you're a blocker for our project, because I think that starts to build a little bit of a resentment, to be honest, from other areas. And you can completely understand it, because they don't see the effect of cybersecurity really in their applications, especially if they're internal. And yet we're often the biggest blocker. It's probably sometimes easier for projects to get financed and supported and get development work and meet deadlines. But when it comes to security, we are pretty tough to please, because we are exact. You have to meet our requirements exactly, or you're just not going to be allowed to implement your project.
I agree. Couldn't agree more with you, Aidan. Again, missing out security is false economies. Could look faster, quicker, more simpler, but in the end, you pay the higher price. In my previous experiences, I've been working with the top 5 European insurance organizations. We were together with their business people, with myself leading this project. We were creating very specific use cases. What is the cost of missing out security by design? So it was the whole set of calculations and so on, in which phases of the project, the early phase of the project, mid phase of the project, and in the final stage of the project. So DevSecOps, this is very close subject to my heart as well. What else I wanted to say is, so we covered this, a very interesting conversation. Again, I brought this up because it is important subject. We are hearing it very often, as you say, in the conversation. So, and I think cybersecurity leaders, when they drive positive security culture, collaboration between certain and different departments should be covered also under cybersecurity culture, just explaining why it's beneficial to work, from company point of view, from organization, from individual point of view. In other words, what's in for the business, what's in for the individual, why do we need to collaborate effectively? So Aidan, let's jump on third video recording to cover incident response, readiness. Do you have to add anything for this topic?
No, not really. I think we covered most of it. It's a very interesting topic, though.
Nice. Okay, good. Thank you.